All right, we are live now, folks. So, hey, folks, this is me, Vishwas Nayan. I'm the host of this panel discussion of the GitOps series that we are planning to build upon. And there is a lot about this technology. There's a lot that we have to speak. There's a lot that we have to evangelize. There's hundreds of things that are coming up in the market which are saying that, you know what, GitOps is this, GitOps is that. But let's break all the rules. Let's break all the myth. Let's learn from the experts out there. And here I'm with Preetham Banerjee, Sanchit Jain, Samik Roy, and my dear colleague, Pawan Kumar, who is one of the rock stars in using Devtron. And he's going to also give you a lot of demos as well as the insights and how GitOps capabilities are made much more easier and faster using Devtron. And here I am with three amazing industry experts, apart from my colleague, who is going to share their experience in dealing with GitOps problem statement and how to deal with it. And thank you so much, folks, for joining this panel discussion. It means a lot.
Thank you, Vishwa.
Yep.
Sure, sure,
Thanks Lisa, for organizing this.
sure, sir. So let's start with Sanchit, sir, and let's go on with this question. So the first question applies to all the panelists here, so they can just go ahead and talk about all the things about technology. So stay tuned for that. So the first question is, what's the advantage of implementing GitOps as one of the practices in our SDLC?
I think a very good question, which I have to convince all of my customer on day one, right? Why are you making these things more complicated for us on day zero or day one? See, there are many benefits, I would say, when it comes to GitOps, right? A larger benefit is how you can rapidly scale your platform and shoot for the market. That's one of the thing, right? Couple of things which we always want to see as a business standpoint, and which is more important in nowadays due to this economical crisis and all, how we can speed up our development cycles, reduce the entire time which takes to go to market, and have more an MVP driven kind of an approach. That's exactly where the GitOps fits well. That if you have the right posture of your entire coding, branching, and DevOps kind of thing, that's help you to scale faster. So yes, there are many people talks about it's a pain. You need to check into every time when you do make the changes and other stuff, but that pain can help you to run faster and learn faster. So that's what I would say when it comes to GitOps and why it is exactly important. Obviously there are different kinds of tools, different implementations available in the market, but the moral of the story in one liner is that, okay, if you want to run your business faster, if you want to go faster and have also a business continuity, then GitOps is a tool for that.
Sure. I think Samik Roy wants to share his knowledge about what GitOps can bring as an capability. So over to you, Samik. You can just go ahead and talk about what is
Uh,
the absolute definition and
yep.
the advantage of using GitOps in the production.
Right. So, yeah. Thanks a lot for inviting. Yeah. I mean, just to add to Sanjay, definitely customer convincing is a difficult part. But apart from that, the way we do, I have been into DevOps plus security, right? So the way I started learning, right, doing some sort of community stuff, example, I just put together a workflow to pull out something out of Twitter, something out of AWS IP links and things like that. So that gave me a privilege to show something working, right? For example, I just create a simple schedule which runs every day and then picks up all the AWS IP addresses and then dumps it through a dumps it to a JSON file so people can access and leverage it in all the security areas. So with that, that's kind of the way how I approach it. And then which helps me when I see show something, kind of, though it's a small thing, may not be a very big business case, but that kind of helps me to sell it, I would say, in a better way and easier way. So they see that it is working, and then I try to invite people in my repositories and then let them kind of contribute, and then run a schedule on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, also just to show them the graph and then list a pull request, and basically the green black dots in GitHub to show the customer, right? See, this is how it looks like. If it actually works, right? We are not talking, only talking. So yeah, that should be from my side. Yep.
Sure, I think Pan, I think you have a lot. to say when it comes to Devtron as one of the platform which helps in getting that advantage of GitOps? Like, we have seen many use cases. We are also coming with a lot of customer stories that we are talking about. So what do you feel is the advantage of GitOps today?
Yeah, so actually, while using, I'm working as a DevOps engineer in Devtron, and Devtron tool is totally dependent on Argo CD, like GitOps mechanism. So whenever, and we just let user to deploy. Our developer is just writing a code and just pushing it to their source code, and that is the like Devtron is just capturing the latest commit and just building it, and just uh, a developer can just deploy this using Devtron, and all the things are saved on the GitOps only. So now DevOps person are totally out of the box while deploying or getting the code live on the production, right? So we just have to monitor that GitOps thing, and uh, like we are totally dependent on GitOps, and we don't have to worry about like if things goes wrong. All the things are saved on like GitOps that we are using. There, it is easy to roll back from the like whatever things are deployed earlier. So yes, it is GitOps is making our life much easier to manage.
Sure. I think, Preetham sir, you have seen multiple industries. You have worked in a service-based company. You then migrated back to a company which is not an totally a critical system, but yet it's going to be a lot of critical system. And now you're part of a very critical system. That means a medical system that you are dealing with every single day. So you have seen how GitOps has really enabled all the process. I think in service based, it was all about Git and just the DevOps tool running out there and churning out the code. But afterward, it was a game changer for anybody to just start out with. So, what do you think is the ultimate capability of an GitOps implementation in an SDLC?
Yeah. So Vishwa, I think Sanchit, Samik, and Pawan, they already actually have given some nice insights about like how GitOps is actually helping the business right now. But like what I feel is this GitOps is pretty new term that has been coined very recently, and this has been coined by the folks from Kubernetes, right? But I mean, like I'm more like focusing into the GitOps principles, right? And these principles are nothing new. Okay, I mean, I will not be saying that like we are seeing this thing for the very first time, right? So I mean, like I'm in the industry for the last 13 years, and so like from the day one like of my job career, right? So I was like so seeing like how the DevOps world like is going on, like how this actually is evolving, right? But especially like so nowadays, so we are kind of reaping the benefit of of say GitOps. Why? Because so we are basically just trying to go towards like the X as a code, right? I mean, I say X as a code because I'm not just talking about infra as a code, but now we are just more trying to move towards like how you can actually just create so everything as a code, and this can be like stored into a central repository, right? And like in this case we are using it as Git, right? And Git is something that we are using it as a source of truth, right? For everything, so whatever that we are doing, however we are trying to manage the infrastructure, right? So like so keeping this in mind, right? So keeping this in mind, I see that how this GitOps concepts are helping the business, are helping the project to create a better process, and which can eventually help the projects to go to market much faster, right? So one biggest one biggest example which I can give from my experience is that the faster go to market, right? So I mean like so earlier what I have seen, like when we are doing any kind of the CI/CD is nothing new, right? So CI/CD is something what we are seeing from very past, right? And so currently the GitOps is nothing but like that is a branching of DevOps, right? So where we are trying to further so create some better process like in the deployment part, the CD part, right? The CI part can still remain the same, right? So like one thing which I personally have seen is the faster go to market, right? That I can make my releases much faster without even say worrying about what will happen if something goes wrong, right? the rollback strategies and all. So these are like very like smooth if you are using the GitOps, right? So particularly, like so we'll be so talking much about it, but like just like a small example. So normally, like in GitOps, like so when we talk about the CD part, right? So Pawan already have mentioned that they are using the Argo CD and all, right? So Argo CD, like how it works is that it basically works like with the pull mechanism, right? So like in that we know, like so if we just have to do any kind of reverting, we just have to make sure that we do the right reverting strategy, and with that right reverting strategy, we can revert like in our Git, and we know like the changes will be properly reflected in the infrastructure also, right? So keeping this in mind right now, I don't have to worry about that what will happen like if something goes wrong. How do I plan my disaster recovery, right? So these all things I don't have to worry too much. And one example which I can give it to you, not from my organization, but from so one more startup that they so with this GitOps, right? So they are right now enabled to do at least 3 to 4 times releases in the production, right? As it is a startup, so you can understand that why they need that, but eventually this enabled them, right? So I mean, like that is one first thing, and the second thing which I would say like that I personally have seen that is a pretty good improvement, or like a big plus is that how we can standardize the process, right? So earlier, I mean, like so earlier also we were like doing the deployments, right? So maybe not by using any kind of infra as a code, but maybe like by using manually, right? And that deployment could be on premise or could be on cloud native, so whatever, right? But it was happening earlier also. It was not the case that earlier we were not doing it. Now with GitOps only we are able to do this thing, right? It is not the case, right? But the advantage is that how standardized you can create the process, right? How much traceability you can create into the deployment process, right? So every single change that you're doing in the infrastructure, it can be so gone through a proper process. Like we can raise a merge request or pull request. This can be reviewed, right? And things actually places like in a very right path, I would say, right? And there are very less chances of making any kind of human errors, right? So sometimes, so what happens that in the lower environment when we are so doing some kind of POC, and we are so procuring some new instance or some new services, and we are done with the POC, and now we want to move to the higher environment, right? So if you go with a manual approach, there is a very high amount of chances that that there might be some human errors, and we might miss to procure some services, or maybe like some network policies are not being applied, and due to this you are seeing some errors in the higher environment, right? And which will eventually take some time to figure out like what was the problem, right? But eventually when you are finding out the root cause, then you got to know, oh, it was an infrastructure problem, right? That we missed to actually add this particular policy, which we have added on the development, but it was not added in like in the SIT, right? These all kind of problems you can handle with this. So you have infra as a code, right? I mean, like you can go deeper into it as server as a code, network as a code, config as a code, policy as a code, compliance as a code. A lot of things are coming up right now, right? The advantage of all this thing, I mean, like what I like to call it as X as a code, right? That it actually creates a solid standardization, and everything can be actually maintained into one centralized place, and something can be called as a source of truth for our entire infrastructure, right? So that is my personal take on like how GitOps is actually enabling the business, and especially how it is helping us to go to market much faster than what we have seen earlier.
Yes, I think every company strategizes GTM. Like go to market is the ultimate strategy. Like you talk to a solution architect, solutions engineer, or else developer advocates, developer evangelists, or anybody who is in the role of this world today, who's dealing with customers, who's dealing with the market. Probably the first thing that they recognize is what should be our go-to-market strategy. And I think there are amazing questions which are coming up. I think Walid, Shari, will you be talking about how traditional STLC environments are not static infra any longer with a cloud native CI/CD tool, elastic on demand, how many stages, platforms, clusters? Yes, we will be talking about it. We will be covering about how the shift left practices are considered today, how we are actually considering, and a lot of implementation, even from the Devtron's perspective, or else even from the Argo City perspective, where our panelists are experienced with. So we can just take it. So the questions are right on the spot. So thank you so much for that. And let's go on with the second question, where we always talk about, you know, there is going to be an way in which we are going to implement solutions, and GitOps model is going to change the way we are going to think what is market the next day itself. Like tomorrow the market changes, we are ready to push the code and make a lot of impact. So how is the GitOps model going to change the way we are going to implement solution? I think Walid, the question is right on spot. So, how is GitOps strategy is going to change the way we're going to implement a solution for the tomorrow's world? So, I think now I go with Samik Roy because he deals with security every single day, and I
Yeah.
love security and I love talking about it.
So,
So, over to you, Samik.
uh, thank you. So, basically, if you talk about this particular topic, right? One good example could be like working in India, and then my counterpart works in US, right? So that's one of the collaborating factor we see, and that's going to change the entire paradigm of development. So it need not to be stopped, right? I write code and I just check in. That's it. He can take it there, and again, when he work with him, it really well documented there when you talk about collaboration, right? And I specifically work a lot with infrastructure as a code, and another challenge I would say, okay, let's say we are testing IAC, and it's very easy to write like 10 form templates or something like that to spin up an environment, but it is also important that when we are done with the environment to tear it down. Otherwise, the cloud printer will just bill us huge way, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, fundamentally what so one of the things, as I mentioned, it is the collaboration piece where we can work across the globe and anybody can be my counterpart. I don't need to be dependent on nobody have to be dependent on me that I have to come up in the morning and then talk about it. And second thing is like the entire cycle of dev dev cycle. So let's say if I want to deploy a huge infrastructure, VMs with particular images, right? So before I deploy that to production, I can definitely spin them up in multiple stages, and if they are satisfying the condition, right, I just tear them down and go to production. So all these risk as well as the collaboration, and even from a security standpoint, the checks we do not only for example depend about can we run it not only look at the dependencies in a timely manner, but we can also do it our due diligence or regular checks or weekly checks, right? That helps us to avoid the unforeseens, which is very difficult, because let's say a developer writes a code and leaves the organization after 6 months. Nobody knows what is obsolete out of that. So definitely that's where these things are kind of helpful, which I would say, and what I've seen in the organizations. Yep.
sure. I think Preetham, sir, I think there is a lot that you can share here because I think the way things were implemented in Mercedes Benz was quite different than other places that we were just moving towards. So I think you were also part of a Java microservices team as well. So you literally had a lot of experience dealing with the code. I think probably you were a platform engineer there rather than just calling you as a data engineer there. So how is it changing in the world of GitOps, making an impact in our SDLC every single day?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. And I mean, like, so before I answer the question, I mean, so I just want to say that you really have a sharp memory. I sometimes myself forget like what was my role earlier. Okay, jokes apart. So like, so one point what Shamik just told, right, about so that is like so with I would say, so irrespective of technology, that's called collaboration, right? That is a very important thing, right? So when we are in a development team, right, now the development team culture could be quite unique to the respective projects, right? So, and it is also quite possible that the development team probably like sitting in the same place, or it is like like it's sitting in multiple places, right? And we all are working in different time zones, right? So this is like few of the things which we normally see, right? And this is like one of the very important thing what I have seen in the GitOps, right? So that actually just helps you to collaborate much better, right? That is one of the very important fact what Shamik just brought. So like he just brought it up, but now I just want to share, like my perception of how I think that the way how we think about solutions have bit changed when we have GitOps in the place, right? So like it's more of like shift of our like of our mindset, right? So now like when we are thinking about designing any solution for any problem statement, right? So first of all we think about that how you eventually want to productionize the solution, right? Building a solution is one thing, productionizing the solution is it's another thing, right? And when we think about the productionization, we have to think about like how we can build a automatic workflow, right? A pipeline, right? that I mean like how we can make sure that the code reviews can be done properly, the MRs can be done properly, and then eventually the CI/CD part can be done properly, right? And also one more thing is this, that with this introduction of GitOps, right, it actually enabled us to do the shift left practices, right? So which is actually a very interesting thing, because like the fundamental of the shift left says that how soon you can actually bring the quality assurance in your pipeline, right, or in your like say development pipeline, right? And that quality assurance could be your testing pipeline or your security practices, right? It could be anything, but eventually like how soon you can bring that, so that we can actually just find out the vulnerabilities as soon as possible, right? And the vulnerabilities could be like your code vulnerability, like your business logic vulnerability, or your security vulnerabilities, right? So with this thing in the plate, right? So when like like me as an architect, like when I sit down and so when I think about it, like how eventually what are the stack that I have to use, what are the practices that we have to bring into this thing, what are the best practices anomaly, right? And how eventually the productionization pipeline will look like, right? So when I think about all these things, right, I have to keep my GitOps strategy in my plate, right? And so when I say about the GitOps strategy, I talk about like what will be my GitOps deployment model, my branching strategy probably, right? So when I say deployment, like it will cover the release strategy also, right? So with this, like as I told you, like it's more into a mindset shift, right? So as we have this, as we know about these practices, like it's more into a mindset, like a core mindset shift, right? So it is not important that your technology stack needs to contain Kubernetes or containers, right? And it is not like that if you do not use this, then you cannot use GitOps. No, it is not like that, right? So it is completely so independent on the stack what you are using. Like it's all about the practices, right? And that is what I told in the very beginning. That GitOps is just a term that is being coined right now, very recently, but it is more into the practices, right? So that is something like what is my take into this, like how I personally have seen that the way how we design a solution, the way how we architect solution have a little bit changed, and it is a good change, of course.
Sure, I think that's the best part about it. And there's a lot that's going on in the market. Like market has no time to think whether my cloud cost is reduced by 100% for the tomorrow, because today it's all about less plumbing, more amount of business logic getting delivered faster, quicker, and better. I think, Sanchit sir, I think over to you. You have a lot to say because Quantify is dealing with not just people problem statement, but also dealing with a technology problem statement with data science, machine learning, and so many things going in the back. So, what is an absolute impact that it has created in order to deliver solutions faster, in from your perspective?
No, I think what the other panelist mentioned, right? I will echo the same, that how exactly GitOps has blend well and all the stuff, right? One of the important things which I think we all need, will all we agree to it, right? The way the GitOps ecosystem has integrated with other kinds of frameworks, right? So I think Preetham also mentioned that GitOps is a term which has recently has come out from Kubernetes guy, right? But the best idea is if this would have been a standalone kind of an offering, it would not have worked, right? It has become somewhere at the central backbone, whether you talk about your DevOps, whether you talk about your data ops, or you talk about your ML ops, right? Or somewhere the new term is coming like a BI ops also. So any ops where you talk about, somewhere GitOps has trying to become the backbone or the foundational layer. So if we try to think from that perspective, it's become very important for whichever organizations you are, whether it's your service or your product based, or you, let's say, offering across different industries. That's exactly where it comes into it, because you need a foundational right posture, a posture which helps you from a security standpoint, which I think Samik mentioned, a posture which you need from an infrastructure scaling standpoint, which I think Walid also mentioned. I know he's very recognized when it comes to container and other stuff. So, and as well as what Preetham mentioned from a product standpoint, where you need, right? So summary of that is, it's very important that you have the GitOps, right? But again, the whole idea of GitOps is also, it's a foundational layer. It's a foundation thing, right? Now with that foundation, you need to understand how you design and blend that very well, right? I always say to my other colleagues, right? uh, The way things have been moving in the market, as you rightly mentioned, it's not a plumbing job anymore, but it's a Lego brick. It's a Lego brick fashion. What brick you need to apply or what kind of puzzle you need to fit is in your hand. So whether you want to build a right posture or right architectural framework, or you want to blow up that everything, it's completely in your hand how you want to do that up, right? So sometimes I've seen where people try to overcomplicate that process just to make everything green, right? So my only I would say simple thought process or request to everyone would be, yes, GitOps is a tool. DevOps is something what everyone looks forward. But try to make this as an evolving fashion. You cannot get everything on day one or day zero, whether it's security, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's GitOps, right? Try to build something which is a scalable, agile, and an evolving in nature. If you have that kind of and stuff, that's what the core success is. Now you cannot build the entire platform or entire product in one day, right? You have this minimum viable kind of concept, MVP. That's exactly MVP or agile behavior is what something is required. And that's what you said about quantify it. That's what is primarily look forward, or I make sure that my team, when they are delivering for the customer in terms of implementation or while solutioning it, we always stick to our agility of delivering the solution, agility of building the solutions. When it comes to delivering of the solutions or building the solution, that's exactly where we see GitOps help us to get that all features wise branching we talk about, or continuous delivery we talk about in production landscape, right? Or we testing and other things we talk about. So that's how GitOps becomes very important. But again, we don't try to make it over complicate with, because if you make it complicate, your development team itself, their productivity will slow down. So you need to balance it out. How exactly you're balancing it? So the whole idea or the expertise you required is balancing. As you rightly mentioned, there are many tools available in the market. Previously, if I talk about, there used to be something called as Jenkins. If I talk about 2015 or 14, right, which is an open source, which used to work well. So there was like a code repo, then there used to be like a different tool for CI/CD. The best thing if I see last 1.5 2 years is the code repository when products like GitHub we talk about, GitLab we talk about, they themselves have come up with the CI/CD natively, like GitLab CI, GitHub Actions, right? So that simplifies it, but you have to make sure that we don't overcomplicate it. There's a right adoption is required, and then kind of an agility and evolving thing is needed.
Sure. I think there's a lot that has to be chiseled out. I think Samik Roy, I think you can really talk about how you saw as an implementation and how it's changing in open systems perspective. I think probably that insight can be a better end for this question.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, definitely. I'll just echo some portion what Sanchez has added. It definitely depends on, there should be someone, either even architect, right? There should be someone who should be learning the process and echoing that within the team, right? You cannot get the whole team to learn learn the thing from day one, and it doesn't work like that. It'll work in reverse if you do that. Now, with time, people should be able to do stuff on their own, right? Because that's where people's interest comes in. And then if they even do smaller things on their own, right, that may or may not fit in the business directly, but what will happen eventually is they get the skill set out of it, which can be leveraged in business, right? So in my opinion, what and I always recommend within my team, right, and I always try to set aside certain time frame to make sure that either you do a POC. It may not be a POC, it can be some study, and then it can be a single line of code, right? So that you have the confidence that, okay, I understand what GitOps is and how it works. Again, it need not to be full-fledged 100% knowing, it can be 10%, right? And then what you do, you basically equalize within the team. So a team member sitting beside you, right, he learns best when you tell him, because you always work together. So that's how I would say is it's how the learning curve should grow, because it's really difficult once you evolve and there's a new tool coming out. And obviously there is a good side and there's a bad side. So good side is today you have to, right, let's say I'll pick up what Sanjay said. So if you talk about Jenkins came up with a lot of features. And then right now, if we look at CI/CD, I mean GitHub Actions, right, There are a lot of things which got simplified in GitHub. You just do one line and pick one GitHub action that might be solving certain problems, or that might be doing certain actions altogether, right? So with that said, I would say the best practice, what I have seen and what I have learned, keep doing stuff out of your work and try to attach to it. That will definitely keep you updated and your team, and you can also become kind of, I'd not say a role model, but you can some sort of an evangelizer team that people look up if something new comes up, and that's why you also stay updated. Yep. So
Sure. I think there's a lot that goes behind.
that's
So
something. Yep.
let's start with the implementation challenges question, right? Right now, me and Samik, before joining the call, like before we go live, we had a problem statement about why is the installation not happening? What's the problem statement where the commit was just like 7 months before, but he is betting on the product and saying, you know what, it still works. Don't worry about it, Vishwas. It's used by enterprise, this and that, and a lot of insights about it because that's a new technology that I didn't know about. That's Open Taxi, and we were just listening to whatever he has to share about. So there is always a challenge in implementation. So there is always a challenge in the way we move forward in the SDLC. So Pavan, let's start with you now. So what do you think is the biggest challenge while implementing and GitOps model on the SDLC, and also how is it changing the way we implement, and how is it changing the way we think complexity according to you?
Uh, yeah, obviously, if anyone wants to apply or implement the GitOps in their organization, the very first challenges that everyone have to face is like they don't know what is GitOps, what are the terms, how it works. So before they just try to learn all the things and learn all the things first, then they just try to implement, right? So first they have to learn. They then if they also think that if all the things are running fine with their current existing environment, or however they are deploying and using, then why do we have to move to the another platform, another platform or another tool to implement the system, right? So the very first challenges they face is the this one, like they have to first go through the all the things, like what are the things in this tool, right? Then obviously there are lots of tool already integrated with their system, right? So whether all the existing integration will work after adding GitOps or not, they also have to figure out. And in many times it won't work. So they have to figure out different ways how it works, how it will integrate it with the existing system, right? So yep.
Yes, so I think dealing with system is something that we have to deal with every single day. Like it's not like you have a system design on draw.io and you are ready to implement everything. There's a lot of changes that has to go on when we are talking about interconnectively and things like that. So I think Preetham sir, I think it's time for you to address the challenges in implementation. So where is the challenge in implementing GitOps today in any of the industry that we can consider today? So where is it?
Yeah. So like I will just like to echo one of the what Sanchit just told, right? Like in the last question. So he just mentioned the point about the acceptance and the resistance from the team, right? So we should not try to overcomplicate things or over engineer stuff, right? And that is a very important point, and that is the biggest challenge what we normally like say face. Like I have seen this problem in two of my team. Okay, and like there were like multiple instances like where I go for any scrum like a scrum retrospective meeting, and people are coming back to me saying that hey Preetham, so don't you think that we are kind of like overcomplicating the process, and we are adding too many steps in the process, and which eventually is like a kind of delaying my development process, right? Like so before I raise a MR, I mean I have to do a lot of things, a lot of process like we are bringing, right? So that is a one big challenge, like what we normally see with any of the change, and GitOps is no exception, right? That if we are trying to bring processes, like it will be registered eventually, right? So people will come back with these points that, like we are adding too many complexities like in the process. So we have to really have a very right balance of how many processes that we are bringing, like say in the process, right? Or like in the entire GitOps, or I would not just say about the GitOps, because I personally have worked with GitOps, MLOps, AIOps also, right? But at the end of the day, like all such star ops, right? Like it is like all about like how you're orchestrating the processes, right? Or how you're orchestrating the components, right? So that is one big problem what we normally face, and we keep hearing from the development team. And yeah, we have to like find the right balance, right? The second problem, what I would say is, like so, which I personally have faced once again, is like so normally when we plan the Git branching strategies, right? So normally, so we have to like plan some kind of release strategy, isn't it? So the release strategy sometimes becomes very complicated. So keeping this in mind, that how many environments do we have, how frequently you have to make the builds into what environment, right? So when this kind of complexities comes up, right, and especially like so think about that you have to go for multi-environment configuration management, right? At that time also, I personally have seen that sometimes it becomes a bit complex to manage the pipelines, right? So, but yes, of course, I mean, I would not say that there is a single solution for all the problems or for all the teams. Like it is going to be a customized solutions, what we have to think of, like keeping the project's need in mind. And yeah, like one another very interesting problem which I personally have faced is about the rollback strategies, right? I mean, I actually just told, you might be asking this question that, hey, Preetham, you just told that rollback is a plus, right, for GitOps, and why you're telling the rollback is a negative, right? But I'll tell you one thing, so this rollback strategy, what we see in GitOps, that is a pretty big plus. But if it is not done properly, right, then it is going to be a big boon for us, right? And that is the kind of problem which I have faced in my current projects also, right? Because like normally, so when you do a rollback, right, so rollback is not just a rollback thing that we call the git reward and we get things being like say rollback, right? So we have to plan the subsequent things also, right? But sometimes what we see that the time when we are rolling back, we are seeing a lot of conflicts, right? And that eventually, so adding some delays in performing the rollback, right? And when we say rollback, think about it that there is a downtime, there is a downtime of a feature, right? And the application is not stable, so we have to immediately perform the rollback. And while we do this thing, say like probably like once in 10 100, so we might face a problem of some conflicts, right? And that eventually will be delaying the rollback process. On top of that, when you do a rollback, we also have to make sure that our testing strategy is also in place, the continuous testing, right? To make sure that the rollback is not introducing any new problems, right? So this is also something which I personally has like finds a problem, that sometimes like it occurs, but eventually we can actually just pre-plan this thing to make sure that that we are covered, like how eventually we can perform the rollbacks, right? Another problem which I would like to highlight, but so this is my personal take, I don't know like how the other panelists will react to this. Like the way how I look into this is that, so we are very much dependent on the tools to implement or to use GitOps, right? So like as I told in the very beginning, the GitOps are some set of practices or some rules, and which are basically being implemented by multiple tools, right? I mean, so we have Jenkins, we have Terraform, Ansible, right? Argo CD, Flux CD, lot of tools are there in the market, right? But like eventually, like what I have seen, like these tools are not yet mature, because so these tools are also going through some maturity steps. And I mean, I'll just explain to you like why I'm saying this. So let me just take an example here, and I'll take an example of a very popular tool, that is Argo CD, which is a de facto tool, like what we normally use, like when we think
Yeah,
about
we also
okay,
support
right?
Argo CD, Flux CD.
Yes, exactly. It is a de facto tool nowadays, right? So even I also use that in my project. Okay. So like if I just think about it, like normally what the GitOps says, that you should not do a one-liner, right? Golden word, that you should not do any manual changes into the infrastructure. Everything should be done from the code or from the Git, right? That you have to maintain the state, the desired state in your Git, right? And then probably like if you are using that's a pull mechanism, then your Argo CD or Flux CD will actually pull the changes to the infrastructure, right? That is a basic thing, isn't it? But what I see is this, like with this definition, I'm not allowed to perform kubectl apply ideally, right? I'm not allowed to go to the cluster, log into the cluster, and like say do the kubectl apply, right? But if I do not have to do this, then how do I manage my Argo CD first of all, right? How do I install the Argo CD? How do I manage the upgrades of the Argo CD, right? So this is like kind of contradicting, isn't it? Now let me just think about it. Like the first installation is the exception. Fine, I will not like say talk about that we are installing it for the very first time, right? And for that, if I have to install that, so that like say Argo CD agent into the cluster, I am allowed to do this. Okay, there's exception. But how about the further maintenance of that, right? So how do you manage the upgrades of the Argo CD, right? And I mean, like I personally have gone through the documentation. I even spoke with the product team, and like it was not so clear to me. Like they are saying that like what you should do is that you can actually just go to the Argo CD installation, get the deployment files, the YAML files, and you put that in the Git, and then eventually you manage that, and then your say Argo CD can be managed by using the GitOps concept, right? But think about it, like there is something called developer experience also, right? So I mean, like what is being asked to me is that I have to go to a install product. First of all, I have to like like go through the YAML. YAML is not a very readable format, right? So I mean, like playing around with YAML. Of course, we have to learn YAML, and so YAML is a way format for like all sort of like the star AC, right? But eventually, it's not a very like convenient file to read and to like say troubleshoot any problem if we have to, right? So they're asking that you have to read that, copy that to the Git, and then eventually like get things auto managed, right? So these two statements are kind of contradicting, like first of all, the principle says do not do any management from your side, and then eventually now these tools are not yet matured in that state where this can be managed directly from some source of truth, right? So but I'm not telling that Argo CD is having limitations. Argo CD is the de facto tool. It is a pretty good tool, but like every tool is like evolving, right? So because like I personally feel that we are in a maturity state. We are actually evolving, right? And that is also one of the point, like if I remember, Sanjeev was also just trying to tell that that we have to slowly be in that evolving process, right? Being from a tool perspective or being from a consumer perspective.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
that's all I can just think of from a pain point perspective.
sure. I think Sanchit sir has a lot to say about it because he has been seeing different industries. I think probably being quantify has a lot of other customers who deal with different scale, different challenges. So there is a lot of challenges that comes up in dealing with so many use cases as well as something which can go in a case studies, but yet we are supposed to work in a real life. So how is the implementation challenges are being evolved, or else like what are the challenges in implementing anything GitOps today? So according to you, Sanjit sir.
So yeah, I think when it comes to Quantify, as you rightly mentioned, right? Quantify is a professional service organization. So we work with different customers across industries. And one of the thing which I think I mentioned in another session also to some other junior guys, right? When I was a fresher, there was a lack of information. But nowadays, the problem is authenticity of the information, right? The authenticity of the information is becoming a challenge. And similarly, I think what I saw my other panelists also mentioned, right? There are many tools available in the market, many methods available in the market, but it's very important that you understand the need aspect of it and you design, right? That's one of the big challenge that comes up, that one sim strategy will not work for all the customers. Some has a different way, some has a different thing. Like very simple example, what I think Preetham just mentioned in terms of the rollback. Now if I am working with, let's say, any e-commerce customers or any kind of a business where they cannot even afford 5 minutes of downtime, right? There the GitOps strategy is much more complicated versus a standalone implementation, which is just a kind of a facilitation for their in-house. So that becomes a very key metrics and challenge, that you cannot have this one strategy will fit all your bills, right? You have to really design the strategy first. Not only design the strategy, and according to strategy you have to select the tools, right? So as we say that our dependency to tool has been increased, similarly we also have to need to be upgraded with each of the tools, what features are provided and everything, right? Like not only just the rollback, I would say. Now other example which I think it's also kind of on my head always has been like how you do a schema evaluation when you're doing on the databases. If there is a schema change, it will blow up your production, right? How can you seamlessly move on? And there are pioneers in the industry who have solved it, right? The best example, Amazon. We don't even know, like, I mean, many a times I've been on the AWS console, and all of a sudden the AWS console changes, right? This I've seen, like I would say, this new console where they have launched. I was just doing something on the console and I was like, okay, and my browser got changed, or what happened, right? All of a sudden this brand new UI, lightweight UI, working very fast. And then I realized it on the LinkedIn, everyone is talking about that Amazon released a cool new UI, right? And they don't even know who's using what, right? But it's seamlessly working fine. So that's where exactly it's very important for us that there are different principles, different experiences, different expertise everyone will bring on table, right? But it's more important for you as an implementator, as an architect, that what is your customer requirement, and you move backward with that requirement to understand the need of the business and try to implement the tools according to that. And I think the best person, I always say, I mean, for the folks who don't know, Walid is the AWS hero for containers, so he knows about it,
He is
what pain
now
I'm
working
talking.
in AWS. No, he's
Yeah.
working in AWS.
Yeah, I know he's working as a senior architect at AWS from this year, 2023. So I know Walid will echo this very well with me,
I
what
think
I'm
why
talking about.
I can share you the link if you're okay with it. You can just hop in and you can start talking. That is not a problem. I think this can be a live show that we can just go and talk to one of our audience as well. So I think Samik Roy has a lot to say because Samik Roy deals with security as one of the problem statements every single day. So over to you, Samik Roy. What is the ultimate challenge in implementing something GitOps? When you think security as one of the industry that you're dealing with every single day?
The- So the challenge is nobody likes security, but everybody want to be secure, right? So that's the thumb rule, and then that's where security guys are mostly but it's equally important, and there are some good part with this GitOps process in place, because you know, if I'm talking to someone, for me it might be easier to convince him to bypass a security check, but I'm putting it the process that is a stagnant thing. It will eventually pass. So from a security standpoint, I see it's an add-on, it's a positive thing, right? But again, having said that, there are cases, you know, there are business cases, business reasons we have to skip securities. Good part is they are documented or they are read in a pull request or releases, which is good, and then we can always put that exception when you do the releases. But that's something, again, we can eventually grow and learn and then try to implement it. That's one thing. And another thing, right? Every day new attack comes in, then even if you look at recent attacks, one airport just left their one S3 bucket, and then that flooded them a year ago, right? So with the GitOps in principle, I would say, I see it's a positive thing from a security standpoint. One reason, as I said, it's easier to convince a human than a system, so it's always good. Second thing is when you put security in place, and let's say you write a simple script which will check all the secret values, right? That is a lot better than 100 code reviews and things like that. That does it really good, right? And also there's another fact that if there's a build failure, right, you exactly know, right, why that build failure is happening. And with the open source tools implementation, we are using let's say log4j, right? So log4j is a classic example. Everybody used it, and when this came up, uh, being in security, it was a good thing. But because the customers who have used GitOps, it was really easy to pick them up, scan, like you just put something as a script in any mechanism, or maybe you can look at actions which will go through all your source code, all your log sources, and give you, this is the places you have. So fixing is the second part with the GitOps security standpoint. Picking up the vulnerabilities become a lot more easier. So for me, it's like, I would say it's all positive, because I have been a developer in the past. It is really challenging when a security guy said, we cannot put your code to production. Then you have to talk to him, sit 2 hours. I'm just talking about, normal human. That would have been my experiences. But again, there'll be like, business cases. Okay, this has to go live, there's no other way, we know the risk. But the good piece is, if we know the risk, at least it is documented. And if someone want to see and want to fix it, right, there is nothing like a single person we have to depend on a single person. Anybody who can read it can fix it. So I see it's a lot positive thing, and it will definitely go over time with better practices. So yeah, that have been my experiences. Yeah.
Sure. I think we are moving towards the end of it. I think due to the interest of time, I'm sorry to combine both the questions, but I think we have to combine both the questions because it makes a lot of sense when we think security and impact at scale. So I think Preetham Banerjee can answer this question on how is GitOps practices making an impact at scale, and also how is GitOps practices helping us shift left quicker, because shifting left quicker was an check mark which happened after we went live with the production, live with everything. Somebody hits on the production and says, you know what, you are vulnerable. Sorry for that. I was able to hack you. And that there used to be the shift left strategy that used to come up. But today it's an shift left strategy first, then code later. So how is GitOps as one of the strategies making an impact at scale, and how is it changing the way we shift left in any of the strategies, SaaS, DaaS, whatever it is? So, what's the impact in terms of security and in terms of scale?
Yeah, I mean, I just make it crisp and short. So first, I'll just take the question about the scale, right? So yeah, I think so keeping the GitOps principles in mind, right? So now I think so we don't so really have to think about that the application is actually if it is a small project, medium project, or a large scale project, right? And so when I say small, medium, large is basically about the workloads, right? Like, so what is our TPS normally, isn't it? So like irrespective of the volume or the size of the project, we can still use the same principles, right? And eventually by using the core principles like infra as a code, right? And then so following the GitOps processes, so these all will remain the same, right? And it does not matter that like what kind of clusters that you're managing, right? I mean, like say if I talk about a EKS cluster or AKS cluster on cloud, right? So it does not matter that so what exactly is the cluster size, right? So like you just have to make sure that that you are so building your say infrastructure as code, and then eventually so it can be like say deployed to the infrastructure, right? So in case if you're not using the autoscalers and everything like that, right? Like with respect to scale, I would say like so it is very very helpful right now because we don't have to worry about the scale at all, right? So I mean we only have to worry about that how we have to design our systems, right? And the scalability part will be completely taken care by the GitOps practices, right? And now coming to the second question about the shift left practices, right? So this is like, I mean, like I was talking about this earlier also, like in few of the earlier questions, right? So this is a concept which is basically being coined from the DevOps world, right? And the concept says about like how fast you can actually or how soon you can implement the vulnerability detection in your pipeline, right? And it could be like we are trying to add the quality assurance, the testing thing, or maybe the security, right? So I'll just like share you one example, like from my very like say recent so one work that I have done. So where we have introduced the DevSecOps practices, and then we actually have implemented a black duck, and by using black duck we are basically just doing the security vulnerability scanning, right? So earlier we were not doing that. Earlier we were kind of like say depending on our very important persona, that is the team of Samik, that like so who are basically performing the pen testing, backdoor testing, right? And especially in my organization, like it is very important that every build needs to pass that, right? But in that particular culture, like we actually have seen a kind of culture that the development team is not worried about this thing, right? So they are only worried about the static code analysis and the code review, and if the business is like all fine, and if we do not see any code smell, it's all fine, right? The developers are not too much focusing into like if we are introducing any security vulnerabilities or not, right? So with this shift left practices, right? So right now, I mean, like now I'm talking about particularly on the security point of view, right? So now actually we have implemented this, right? So there are like many other tools. I mean, I just like talked about the tool which we personally have used, and then so there are other tools called Sonar Cube, Sync is there. So a lot of tools are there, right? But eventually the main intention of the tool is that how soon you can identify all the security vulnerabilities, right? And this I just talked about the security. The same thing is applicable for testing also, right? And now just think about it, like how GitOps is helping this thing, right? So now I just like talked about the basic fundamental of the shift left practices, right? And how the projects are basically using it. Now GitOps, the very fundamental of GitOps is automation. How we can actually enhance automation, right? And with this automation thing, right, we are able to very smartly plan that how you want to integrate the continuous testing in the pipeline, right? And it does not have to be just like at the very end or like after one stage and we only have to do it once. We can run it twice also, right? And like as right now we are able to build this proper pipeline by using GitOps, right? So we are actually so kind of trying to find out the vulnerabilities, either application code vulnerabilities or any security vulnerabilities as early as possible. So definitely it will, like help us in multiple ways. First is this, it will reduce the development time, right? Second is this, it will also save cost, right? And that is what business really like say looks for, right? And why I'm saying it will save cost is because like the late like the more you will find defects at the later stage is the more that you will be spending time before you go to the market, right? And like if you are actually finding the vulnerabilities like at the earlier stage, it is also quite possible that we might be able to find out even very edge cases problems, right? Which we might not be able to find out at the like say at the later stages, right? And even the testing team, the QA team, they'll also get ample amount of time, right, to write the test cases, right? So that is what my take, like how this GitOps like is eventually helping us to follow the shift left practices, and how the project teams are getting benefited.
Sure, I think there is a lot that Sanchit sir can really talk about, where he had a lot of impact that has to happen at scale, where he has to think about how security has to happen at scale. So are there any use cases that you can talk right away which talks about how it impacted in scale and how it impacted even in the security of the application that is getting deployed?
Sure. No, yeah, I think as you mentioned, right, we have done a good amount of work across different customers, right? So one of the thing where we have worked on a scale, if I talk about, is uh, we have done like millions of document is what we have processed on that large scale, right? When we talk about this kinds of large scale kind of an implementation, it becomes very important that we have a proper kind of an infrastructure with scales around it. You have a proper benchmarking, and as I said, right, it's all about how you move backward with your requirement. So if you think that the requirement is this, then how do you develop it, how do you solution it, how do you have the right posture, right? So that was one of the thing which was very important. The another thing, if I talk about this entire machine learning piece, right, we do a good amount of large implementations in machine learning space. uh, and there the MLOps again, this term has been very new. It seems like last 1.5 2 years has been there, right? But again, I am pretty sure I've done the first kind of an implementation with MLOps somewhere around 2017, leveraging Jenkins and all, right? That time it was very new. This all GitLab CI and those kinds of stuff were not there. So no ISV tools. I mean, there were some kinds of tools available, but not that kind of what you can do a custom tailored kind of thing. So I do still remember the kind of impact what we did by deploying that kind of a solution was great impact. Like there were like around easily 1,500 to 2,000 of different machine learning models at scale, which we were deploying, not deploying like the entire life cycle, what we talk about of training, developing, training, doing benchmarking, doing production release. So still I remember that. I mean, there are different kinds of examples I would say we have done that, but that's still close to my heart because that is what we designed the entire principle and custom tailored and deployed it. And that's where exactly what we see as of now has been very seamlessly been done with help of other tools available in the market. But as I think Preetham also mentioned while back, that with adoption of tools, somewhere things have been simplified, but it all remains foundationally your design principles. That design principle is very important, whichever tool what you choose, right? So that's why even though I've done this like 6 years back, but that's project is still close to me because the foundational design principle what we have leveraged still date, I can see that team is using the same kind of a pattern in a different tool. So that's where I see that it's more important that you have the right design principles and the requirement understanding around it. And when it comes to GitOps, as I said, right, at the beginning also, it's a foundation of what you talk about your AI ops, ML, data, and other thing, right? Because that's where the core starts. Whenever you are working with some core, it's a Spider-Man kind of thing code, right? with great power comes great responsibility, that kind of stuff. So you have to make sure that you not only design your GitOps strategy, which is very scalable, but any lightweight, flexible plug and play kind of thing, so you can easily evolve. Because you can all, I mean, as a startup, any customer, whichever it is, everyone has started their journey as a startup. No one start as a millionaire, right, or as a Fortune 100. They start small, they prove it, and then scale it and nail it, right? So if that is a life cycle what you want to do, you always have to start small but think big. And that's where exactly the GitOps fits well, right? Let's start with the right posture, think for a large big picture, but try to make it as an evolving thing.
Sure. I think even some of the open source implementations that we have today are
Right.
startups. Like they think big because we believe in an Kubernetes ecosystem and we evolve accordingly. Like our developers today code for Kubernetes, testers test for Kubernetes, and we deliver solutions for Kubernetes. And the whole point about it is it's never about creating an extravagant system that is like, you know what, it scales to the best, it scales to the max limit that you can never think about, and everything is so nailed up and things like that. It's all about evolving. I think there's a lot of things that any startup can use using Devtron. There's a lot of impact that they can talk about. I think it's time for me to go to Samik Roy, who is going to share me some insights about how it impacted at scale for them, and also how is the security practices are getting influenced while there is a GitOps strategy. So I think over to you, Samik. The
I
stage is
think,
completely yours.
yep, to call out a thank you. So, I'd like to highlight a very specific scenario we mostly work with Azure. So now this is a policy, right? And then if you are not putting your policy, that can scatter all your cloud bill,
It's
in there
actually
anywhere, right?
breaking. I think Samik sir, I think you just have to just
So one
start
of the
again
things
because it's
happens with
breaking.
policy. Policy is so it's a JSON based.
Actually,
Yeah.
you are breaking actually.
If you do an
So
error,
no, you're
sorry,
actually
is it
breaking.
good now?
Kind of good. You can start out with
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Is it all good?
Yeah, it's all good now.
Uh, so fundamentally, what I was trying to say, for example, in any cloud, let's say Azure, for example, policy is one such thing which is really important, so that they should be there in your foundational environment to make sure that all your resources are rightly pointed, having the right properties and things like that. Now, one challenge with policies is there is no great tool which will tell you at the compile time, even at the build time, that policy is wrong. You can only see if you deploy it and test it. So that's something I'd like to say, that specific incident, helps us that whenever we are doing a cloud foundation deployment, right, that's a huge scale deployment. So we just build out, let's say, 50 policies, and then put out a vnet infrastructure, network infrastructure, create some virtual machine, and create some default logging resource and things like that. But before we go there, with GitOps, what we did, we just did a subset deployment of that, and made sure that everything what we did do right was in line. Because if you cannot test him, you can make an error out of it and make sure that that is correct. So that's like other way of twisting the things in terms of security, right? To make sure that was correct, to put the checkbox right. So then again, we scale down on, make the demolish the environment, and then go for the actual production one. So I would say, but with automation testing is the key for that example, what we have seen, and that was really greatly helpful. Yep.
Sure. I think there's a lot that we can speak about, and thanks to our amazing panelists who just shared a lot of insights. Samik Roy, Pritam Banerjee, Sanchit Jain for such great insights, because a lot of things that we talk today is not just about Kubernetes being an impact for the tomorrow as well, because Kubernetes is changing every single day. Like OpenShift is also an other ecosystem that's coming up today. There's a lot of DevOps practices going on, and a lot of things are happening. So thank you so much to all the panelists who are there here. And I think Pawan, it's over to you. You can just go ahead, share your last set of insights, last set of demos that you had planned, and you can go ahead with everything that you planned today.
Okay, thank you, Vishwas. So, yes, talking about the last question, like how GitOps is making difference at different scale. So, if I just give you a live example, like for the current scenario that I've gone through. So, one of the organization are using like Argo CD, GitOps approach, and they are managing kind of 40 to 50 cluster using a single tool, and all the developer are deploying the things on the Kubernetes, and they don't even know what is pod, what is different kind of Kubernetes resources, and they are able to deploy it on the Kubernetes cluster and make it live, right? So obviously we have to plan in such a way so that all the developers can itself, like themselves can deploy on the Kubernetes or the production. So yes, I will be just sharing my screen and will show you how they are actually managing, and without even knowing what are the things going on the back screen. So I'm just sharing my screen.
Sure.
uh, yeah. Where it is. Yeah.
I think there's a lot that we can talk about Devtron making an impact. Like there, I feel it's a battle-tested platform for your DevOps. Like that is what I feel about. Like most of our customers really deal with a lot of use cases that we are having. I think even the open source world is also changing. So yeah,
Uh,
over to you, Pavan.
yeah.
The
So
stage is
is my
yours.
screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so you can see I'm just using a Devtron platform, which is, you can say, like which is made on Kubernetes and made for Kubernetes. And behind the scene, Devtron uses GitOps approach. So uh, so whenever you install a Devtron, you have an option to enable a GitOps. So just set it as Argo CD enable true. Then you just have to set it set the GitOps where what is the configuration, like where do you want to save your uh, data and the configuration, and just you just have to create an application, add the different cluster on which you want to deploy. So right now it is configured with the default cluster only, but yes, as I was saying, in our one of the organization we have configured it to the 50 cluster max, they are using and deploying all the things from the single screen, like using Devtron, and they don't even know about the Kubernetes, what are the things going on. So if you just create an application, this is a one of the application that I've created to show a demo. And if you show click on this application, you can see I have just given my source code repo. So you can see it's a sample Node.js application, and I'm just asking him like create a image and put it on this container registry. And here is my Docker file. Use this Docker file to build. Then this is my configuration, what actually you have to deploy, and whatever you change over here, you save it over here. Then you can just, whenever you deploy over here, it will be saved on your GitOps that you have configured. Let me share where it is. Yeah, here. So you can see whatever changes you will make there, it will be visible on your GitOps that you have configured. So I created this demo app using this Devtron tool. You can see this is all the things we have created is getting pushed over here. So let me just configure it. Mm, just a second. So let me just configure it, change the configuration and deploy it again. So I'm just deploying by changing the resource and limit, save it, and just click on this deploy button. You will see like it will push your changes over here, and all the things will be synced from the Argo CD. So you can see there is a commit just right now that we have deployed through Devtron, and this will be synced whatever changes you have done. This will be synced in your application, and it will keep your record over the GitOps. So as you can see, a new pod came up, and if you just check the manifest, you can see the resource limit for this application is now 11 MI. So if you just go to the application like Argo CD UI, since we are using Argo CD in the background, so just let me just log in here.
And everything is a seamless integration here. Then it's just you
Yes,
go to the stack
they don't.
manager and you just go ahead and install it, and you just have everything sorted out
Yes,
in the Devtron platform itself.
yes. So as you can see, here is the application and Argo CD UI. All the things are synced over here. So let me just log out and log in over here. What was the password? So I just, yeah, here it is. Yeah. So as you can see, two changes to make the changes and deploy it to the whatever application or environment user wants to deploy. They don't have to even know what are the resources they're gonna create, what would be the configuration for the same. They just have to commit their code. This Devtron will fetch their commit, build the code based on the configuration that they have done, and it will be deployed from here only. They don't have to worry about the configuration and all. So yeah, that's it. Mute.
Uh, Pawan, I have just one
Yeah.
question. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so in this thing, I mean, like, so you, like, say, from Devtron, I mean, I can have the connectors to Argo CD to, so whatever the CD tool, like, which I want to use, right? And then eventually, I think the
Mm-hmm.
management of that tool will be done with that UI. Or, like, say, you also have integration that, so you have built in the Devtron itself. Like, say, I mean, like the way how you went to Argo CD UI, and then eventually you are trying to see the pipelines, the DAGs, and everything, right? Or like what are
Mm-hmm.
the state that it has synced, right? So is it like that? Do you have any integration available in Devtron also, that I don't have to switch
Uh,
my, say, Windows, and I can see everything from, say, one platform?
yes, so we have an option in the Devtron that where you can say where you can set the external link, so that you can just redirect like wherever you want to switch since Argo CD there would be a different endpoint for the Argo CD UI and for the different tool. So you can just create an external link. It would be there in your application available, and you can just click on that icon, and you will be redirected to the whatever configuration that you have done.
Got it.
So the moment you just have an external link creator, you just have to just go and add the link there on your global configurations, and you can still go and navigate to that application. So right now, if you even think about our entire platform is more about enabling developers rather than just only giving an access to a DevOps engineer. So I think most of the things people love about our platform is it enables developers to see what infrastructure was, then what they used to just go to the DevOps engineer and say, you know what, is our memory optimized? Is our CPU optimized? Nah, everything is there in front of them. So I think that's how you can just go ahead and just navigate to an external link, and external link will be able to give you all the access for that. Sure. I think any other questions or queries, doubts, and questions. So don't worry about it. We are still here. So we are still active on LinkedIn. So go ahead and check out. And thanks to my amazing panelists today who literally came back. They shared their industry insights. I think Sanchit Jain, Samik Roy, Preetham Banerjee. We had a lot of interaction that you guys gave out. And thank you so much, everybody, as an audience who just logged in Saturday evening and they're still with us. And over to you, panelists. Like, if you have any things to say about, if you have any other things to share, you can just go ahead with it. I think Sanjit sir, Pritam, Samik Roy, if you have any other things, please go ahead with it.
Well, I just wanted to conclude by saying, like, that so it was a very interesting session, and the questions, like, was quite relevant, and I believe that, like, in almost all the industries, because these all concepts are something what we so use across all the industries, right? So irrespective of pharma, automotive, aviation, whatever, right? So these concepts are going to be same across everywhere. So I hope that that we have touched upon some very interesting points, and we all were able to share our insights. So with this, I mean, I would really like to just say thank you, Vishwa, for conducting this session, and
Thank you, sir.
thank you to all my panelists.
Yeah, sure. I think Sanjit Jain, Samik Roy, if you want to share anything, please go ahead with it.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. Thank you, Vishwas, for organizing this. I think it was a very informative session, right, to talk about and see what exactly the vibes are from the industry, right? So there are different panelists from different backgrounds. So that's an interesting thing to talk about, right, as always. And yep, as I think I've been constant giving in this entire session, right? Don't make it so hard. Try to keep it simple, right? That's the always principle of an engineer. Keep it simple and keep it evolving. So if you focus on that, things will be falling in the right place.
Sure. I think thank you so much, Pritam sir, for that amount of insight about
Right.
different industries that you had, and it was great. And Samik
Yep.
Roy, if you have anything to please share, go ahead and share with us.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah. So thanks a lot for hosting this, and as well as from my side, I think with the diverse background, we need collaboration on the discussion, and really nice way of ending with a cool demo of Devtron. So really liked it, and I hope people, audience watching this, they definitely get some insights out of it, and then at least we as a panelist are able to encourage them to bring into this practice. So yep, thanks a lot to everyone who have joined, and thanks a lot everyone who have been participating. Yep.
Sure. I think Pawan, it's over to you, buddy. You work with the platform every single day. Like, he joined before me in Devtron, so he has more amount of experience with the platform. There's more amount of experience and more amount of stories to share. I think there's one more person named Prakarsh, and he's one of the coolest engineers that we have, and he has a lot of stories to share. And I'll be getting him on the show as well. So stay tuned for that. And I think over to you, Pawan. If you have any final thoughts, please go ahead with it.
Yeah, thanks, Vishwas. Thanks for giving me opportunity to have a discussion with like Sanchit, Samik, and Pritam. And yes, I would say being working as a DevOps engineer, I am really enjoying this journey. Like working as a DevOps engineer, like I just loving it. And
Yeah, dude,
GitOps
I'm
is
also trying as a community evangelist here. I'm getting to know most of the things what DevOps didn't teach me. And yeah, there's a lot of learning that's happening in Devtron every single day. That's for sure.
yeah.
All right, my friends, it's time for us to say goodbye and meet you soon with the next episode, which is going to be more about how GitOps has been enabled. I think next session is on 28th, which is Tarun Marwa is going to come and who's going to give you a lot of insights about Argo CD and other technology, which is used for enabling GitOps as one of the practices. And I hope many other panelists do join us in future sessions. Of course, Sanchit, Samik, Pritam have always been the speakers of the session, and people love them. This is what we do. This is what we are here for, to evangelize DevOps the right way, and we are here to get you the right practices, the right tools, and the right technology. And thank you so much to all my dear panelists. Just love the conversation that I had today, and it was lovely talking with you folks with some of the technical glitches that we faced, but yet we were able to solve it, and we were able to do a lot of amazing talks about GitOps. So this is Vishwas Nayan signing off from the show. Thank you so much, folks. Meet you soon.